This is Josh Walsh. I am the producer of the Jesus Music, and you are listening to the Wildman and Steve Show. Enjoy.
You are about to listen to the intersection of faith, talk, and music. The Wildman and Steve Show starts right now.
Yeah, this is going in a very interesting direction, and certainly something not planned because, well, we never plan anything. But
Steve doesn't plan. I do. No.
Yeah, right. But I'm going all the way back to our very first real episode of the two of us interviewing somebody together, which was Rex Carroll, and I remember him talking about learning in a very classical way, in a very traditional way, and really hating a lot of the sort of the basic pieces he had to learn and so forth before he could ever get to play something cool. And then you've got the guys who are great guitarists and really can't read music, right? They've picked it up along the way. So if I could go another step further with you guys, what do you think is there a prerequisite, do you think, for being able to read music? Maybe that really helps, but not necessary. Do you think that somebody really should learn some traditional, foundational, basic stuff in a very traditional way? Or is it cool just to go ahead and start jumping in and learning some, basic power chords and so forth? What do you guys think about that?
For me, it was critical to, as fast as I could, learn something that I loved. Even it didn't matter if it was how simple it was, but if I could play along with the stereo, that was cool. And that was inspiring, and that made me want to learn more. It's like, hey, I'm playing something that guy's playing. He's on the radio, if I keep going at this, how far can I go? That kind of inspiration. As far as learning how to read music, I don't read music. I can read basic stuff, but not that far along. For me, it was not necessary. I think it's always great that the more knowledge you can have, but it definitely was not essential for me in enjoying the instrument and learning it.
Yeah.
So what about you, Wildman?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's the same way. You don't need to. I knew how to read music because I grew up around the piano and all that, so I already knew some. Right. And then I had an urge after I heard that Rex Carroll got his degree in classical guitar. I had an urge to start learning classical guitar because as soon as I I started doing that. So I started reading music because, hey, Rex did, I should,
Right.
I was 16 doing that. And so that caused me to have a love for the classical guitar. And I still play classical guitar now. And I see the connection between that and rock and metal and all that. But I mean, there's no question. If you listen to the interview, the big popular interview that Eddie Van Halen did about 5 years ago, when he was talking about not reading music and basically was taking credit for tablature and basically saying that people have to find a way to write my stuff out. And so they either created or brought back this thing and gave it a different name called tablature, all because of Eddie Van Halen, because they were like, he's, in his words, what do we do with this? How can we communicate this? Because it's not on the staff and he just plays on whatever he's feeling he plays. And that's something I think that is the guitar does do. And I think it does it for Ray when he plays. I think it's the idea of you can just pick it up and just play what you feel or play what you hear, probably more so than any other instrument.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it's not too late for you, Steve.
I know. Well, yeah, it's not too late,
buddy. You can do it.
In fact, In
If-
fact,
if
both
only
of
I
us are
knew
gonna
a good-
give you a lesson tonight, Steve.
I gotta say, if only I knew a good teacher somewhere.
Well, you know, I don't know if you could afford, but we don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah, they're kind of pricey. Yeah. Especially if you know them.
Yeah, especially if you know them.
Yeah, there's gonna be
Right.
there's gonna be contracts signed. Believe me, there's
Yeah.
gonna be contracts.
You get the opposite of the discount, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm charging you more.
Right, right.
So Ray, you alluded earlier about the passion to write and how that just was a natural inspiration, which I find very intriguing. That nobody had to come alongside you and said, you should start writing. You just had this natural, organic thing that took place. You listened to the music and say, hey, I want to do that. So you just started writing. So talk to us about your passion for writing and what is it you're trying to get across in your writing, and how do you go about writing?
Yeah, so there's really the main way it happens for me is, and it's happened with every one of these songs that we've done, is something that's on my heart strongly, that I'm continually thinking about. Maybe it's a subject matter, and that may lead to a melody coming in my head, and then I want to immediately reproduce it. So then I grab the guitar, I'm finding chords, and if it turns out that I think it's worthwhile and it's good, that could lead, to a song. That can come about from listening to something at church on Sunday. It's happened, something that stuck with me, from reading scripture, from just an experience in life, But ultimately, it comes about from catching a melody in my head with a combination of words. And sometimes it's just one line, and that can start the whole thing.
So over the years, do you have even a ballpark number of how many songs you have written?
Oh, it's a lot. It's got to be a couple hundred for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Now, if you ask me how many were good, that's a different question. People always say, Ray, why don't you record more songs? I record a lot of songs.
Yeah.
Asking me how many are good. See, that's the difference. And I remember listening to an interview with ABBA, and they were talking about that. And these were people that, they didn't have day jobs. Every day they were going in, writing songs day after day after day. And they said, well, how many good ones did you get in a year? He goes, you're lucky if you got 10.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing it every day. And you hear this from a lot of different groups. The same thing. It's not easy. There's no magic button for that, right?
Yeah.
You have to keep at it. You have to keep being open to ideas and trying things, and you have to work at it for sure.
Hey, Steve, how you doing? Any projects this summer?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do some siding on my house.
Really?
Yeah. Why is that funny?
Remember back when they had aluminum siding?
Oh yeah, man, that stuff was brutal. I mean, you cut your hand just looking at it. Man, it was a good decision when they went with vinyl.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah, vinyl. And if only we could.
We can at girdermusic.com. Go to girdermusic.com today and find the classics you love remastered on CD. And yes, that's right, dust off that turntable. It's time for vinyl. You will be able to buy 3 vinyl records, Disciple, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, Scars Remain, along with new re-releases by Petra and DeGarmo and Key at girdermusic.com.
I'm sorry, what's that, dear? Siding on the house? Vinyl siding? No, I think you misunderstood.
Go to girdermusic.com today, and you can get 10% off your entire order.
Just use the code Wildman and Steve, all spelled out with no spaces, and you'll get 10% off your order at girdermusic.com. Again, the code is Wildman and Steve.
Well, I want to circle back around. So you talk about some church influence. Maybe you hear something at church and that leads you to write a song. And earlier you had talked about even still listening to some music that you grew up with, maybe not necessarily Christian. Of course, you've mentioned Petra specifically.
Right.
Talk to us, and I think fans always love to hear what the artists they listen to like to listen to. Right. And especially when the artists they listen to are listening to some of the same music that they listen to, then there's that point of connection. I go, wow, we really like the same stuff. So what are some of the bands from back in the day, Christian or secular, that really still have a special place for you?
REO Speedwagon is one because like White Cross, they were an Illinois band. And they were constantly playing local places, whether it was schools or festivals. So, getting to see Gary Richrath at that young age was amazing, and they were fantastic, and really, really inspiring. I listened to a lot of Journey, a lot of Kansas, Kerry Livgren. He was very inspirational. What a deep guy. Of course, he ended up doing Christian music with AD, I believe. But it was always melodic rock. It was, I wasn't really into the stuff like Iron Maiden or Black Sabbath or the darker type of feel. I was always more attracted to a happier melody being in there, something, that type of music that made you feel good. And Boston was probably the biggest one. I just love the harmonies. It had a positive feel to it, the soaring vocals and the production on it was something that really caught my ear. The way that he would mix the guitars and double up the parts and add harmonies. There was a lot put in there, but it sounded wonderful to me. So they were really inspirational. Now, once we had that transition where we were just really starting to write Christian music, of course, we were just drawn to mostly the Christian artists, which would have been the guys that you just seen. Bloodgood, White Cross, which is, I believe, from Waukegan, I believe where they started. So another Illinois band, so that was big. But and then another one that was really inspirational, maybe more on the spiritual side, was Res Band. I mean, you want to talk about really getting into ministry. I don't know if anybody did more than Resurrection Band. Living communally, helping homeless people, all the things that Glenn Kaiser and them have done, and then starting Cornerstone. And there's probably so many things I don't even know, that they've done. And so we were very aware of them. And I went to I think a prayer breakfast with Glenn, with a lot of other artists. That they were kind of helping other artists, young artists like us at that time along, and so they were doing a lot, and that was really inspirational. It was like, there's a lot more to this than just playing the music, right, and writing the songs. There's another side, to doing this big purpose of what we're trying to do, which at that time was really ministering to youth. That's really where our heart was. And that's what we wanted to do. And there was a lot more involved than we thought. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I remember when we had Glenn on the show, he talked about the fact that for him, at least, and Resband, there just wasn't an interest in writing maybe a little bit more bubblegum fluff kinds of pieces. They wanted to address issues that real people were wrestling with, struggling with, going through. And I'll never forget, it was the Between Heaven and Hell album has that song, Zout African, on it. And I remember listening to that and, being in an era of, Stryper and Petter and the others, and then hearing that song going, well, that's different.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so you're right. And of course, I think he's still passionate about, so many of those issues. And
absolutely.
And if you think about the Jesus Music movie that came out, in 2021,
right?
You look at a lot of those bands that came out of the 70s, that era, whether it was folk music or the kind of rock of the 70s, was very issue oriented. It was very issue driven. And so to see Christian bands of that same musical feel, well, of course, they're going to tackle in the same way lyrically. They're going to get into that. And again, I'm afraid some of our fans are going to think we always just bash modern music, and maybe we do, unfortunately. But sometimes I wonder if you always hear some of that in modern music, both Christian and secular, the way you used to. And
I don't. I don't hear it the same way. I think it's different, and maybe some of that is because the experiences that those people had. In fact, I just saw a documentary on Resband. I believe, I don't know if it was on YouTube. I watched it. You want to talk about humble beginnings? These guys going around on the bus. They weren't staying in nice hotels, things like that. They were experiencing hard times, and it was their faith that was really driving them. And I see some of the things that are those same things happening in our society today, the way that we can get so comfortable that we forget the things that are really important and that really matter.
Demanding it's all free, but freedom has a price to pay. They bear for all to see. Rage for the machine. No love lost for the silent scene.
When things happen like what's going on in Ukraine, it can put things in perspective real quick.
Sure. And that that's a good concept to go to lead up to the next question I had for you, was the idea of being an independent artist. We see on Twitter, that's how I found you. And Twitter is any independent musicians out there, I would recommend get a Twitter account, because if you're looking for connections, if you're looking for support, if you're looking for advice, indie artists are all over Twitter, and
Right.
I love it. But I know from working with you, Ray, you work not just a full-time job, but you work a full-time job.
Right. Right.
And it's hard to even think about you doing what you do in your spare time. So how do you do it? How do you find the time to record not only your own stuff, you write your own stuff, you record your own stuff, you mix your own stuff, but now you're mixing stuff for other bands. How do you find the energy to continue to do it? And because the reason I think that's important is because you mentioned, talk about humble beginnings. That's kind of where the majority of artists are finding themselves now, is in that humble beginnings, where they have to work a job. They're not on the stage, not in the hotels. It's really that's where you're at right now if you want to go into music.
Well, I got exhausted just listening to you describe that. Wow, I didn't realize all that. Really the true answer is I have a great wife. That's the wonderful thing. And so, she has her hobbies that she likes to do. And so we have our time together. We have our time where we do our thing. And I really enjoy it. It's really relaxing, whether I'm playing guitar, whether I'm mixing, mastering something for somebody. But working on the music is really a great way for me to unwind. And so I don't get to do it as much as I would like to, for all the reasons you described. But I do fit it in, and it's wonderful.
So with that, like, what would you say is your passion? I mean, because I think that one thing you and I probably had in common years ago was, at least for a short amount of time, we saw ourselves on stage full time. At least for a short amount of time, we envisioned we're going to be on the road for the rest of our life, and this is what we're going to do. And that was a very short time for me, at least. It was longer for you.
No, me too.
It was very short for me. But
me too.
That now you find yourself, okay, if God opens that door, sure, that'd be great. But I don't sense from you that that's your passion right now. It's not like you're trying to get to break the door down to get signs so you can be on stage and do this full time, although that would be great. But you've accepted where you're at, and how you're doing it now. What is the passion that you have in being a musician and artist right now?
I would say it's a great question. To be able to fully develop the songs and the music and the ideas in a way that I was never able to do before. And there's some things that really have come about and that have changed to bring that about. And the biggest one is technology.
Yeah.
I used to use all audio, analog equipment.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for a while, when I stopped doing it, and the computers were getting better and the software was getting better, and I'm kind of watching on the outside, and I'm getting intrigued, and the first stories I'm hearing about it is, well, you're going to spend more time fiddling with it, than you are recording. So that's not good. But then they got it to the point where it started to be kind of the opposite, where you could come up with a great sound, make it a preset where you could instantly pull it back up. You could make the recorder do things that took two people to do before. Now you really got my attention, because if my experience of what I had with the analog equipment would translate well to digital and to the new equipment, I thought, I don't want to miss out on that. And I want to see what I can do with it. And if we don't have the limits of maybe just me and my partner on drums, if we're willing to bring in different people for different songs, almost like a Steely Dan, where you had those two guys and it was all about the songs. It wasn't about them trying to be flashy with what they can do and themselves. it was, let's focus on the song and let's make it as good as we can.
Yeah.
And that's really been the inspiration. First of all, to come up with a message or something that I really want to say. And then to be able to say it and experience it in a way that I feel is complete, where I was never able to do that before. So that's really inspirational, and it still keeps me going.
It's 2 a.m. in the morning, lights flashing in my eyes. The silence of the night disappears with the sounds of children's cries. Fire rages before me. I see a father hold his family tight. Through tears he softly tells them, "You're all that really matters tonight."
You know, as an artist, you've talked about, you know, the God honoring sort of lyric and the message and so forth. And I guess I want to come back at, kind of on that piece. And simply because we've been talking about this very recently, when we were interviewing in Ohio, Bloodgood and White Cross for video. It's going to be coming out. And again, it's something we're exploring in this series of blog posts as well. You kind of have a couple of camps, and over about 3 years of doing this podcast, we've really seen artists fall pretty clearly into one of two camps. The camp of positive lyric. The Christian message is subtle. It's going to be under the radar. And that's kind of, you know, Paul, I'm going to become all things to all people, so by all means I might save some. So perfectly valid approach. Then you've got we're actually practically quoting scripture in the song lyrics. And that's also Paul. I'm going to know among you Jesus Christ and him crucified, you know?
Right.
So kind of which of those two camps do you see yourself more, whether you want to think back to the earlier days or what you're doing now and where you're headed in the future?
That's a great question. And there's definitely been a transition. When I was in Divinity, it would have been Camp 2, your second one, for sure. Just plainly speaking the gospel in our songs. Okay. Now I'm in Camp 1. I want to keep people guessing a little bit. I want them to think. I want them to wonder, what exactly is he talking about? You know, I want to investigate that a little bit. So that's kind of fun, you know, fun to do. Obviously, if you're doing worship music, you're not doing that, but I'm not, you know, in the same way that Steve, that I was saying, we're not holding back as far as who we're choosing to help out in a certain area with the music. And it's kind of the same way lyrically. It's like, I'm not putting limits, you know, on what I'm going to write about. We've got all there's so many subjects that we've covered, whether it was, you know, the shootings in Chicago that go on weekly, how they're affecting children. You know, we did that in one song. So, you know, whatever is coming on my heart. But I think that you put the nail on the head. People usually are in one camp or the other. I'm going to be probably on the first one, a little more subtle in my message. You might have to think a little bit, you know, but I like when the disciples asked Jesus, you know, why are you always speaking in parables, right?
That is exactly what I was thinking. Literally, that is exactly what I was thinking about. There were times when Jesus himself, sometimes Jesus was so clear, it was just, you know, ridiculous. It was like, you know, mic drop moments. And other times it was the subtlety of the parables. It's exactly right. And the other thing I like, though, with your answer, you talked about how that has changed a little bit over time.
It has.
From Divinity to now. And we think about artists I love hearing artists who change and explore different styles of music throughout their career. And it's not always, maybe you have the commercial success with a particular style, and
Right.
especially back in the day, the label wants just 100 more albums of exactly the same style.
Right.
And the real musician says, sometimes I want to explore something different. I really
Right.
want to do that. And as a music lover, I like hearing artists explore musically.
Right.
But then I think it's also neat to hear exploring lyrically as well, and to hear that development, what you call it, progression, but just different. You kind of do something different now.
Exactly, and that's the other great thing about being an indie artist, and like Wildman was talking about, and the people that I've met on Twitter, including Wildman, and it's great seeing people do different styles, lyrically, musically. When you're an independent artist, you're not answering to the label, right? So you can do all that stuff, So I've had people on Twitter reach out. Mike Boucher reached out. He says, "Hey, let's collaborate on a song." He mostly had it, but he said, "Hey, play some guitar. Do this." Just a ton of fun and a great message song, and ended up doing mixing an album for the Metal Birds, and then really enjoying, having that time and camaraderie with them, and things like that. Things that are a lot tougher to do if you're not an indie artist, for sure.
Well, so before we get to where they can find you and all of that and what you have going on, there's something that we do need to include in this episode, Steve, and that's because you and I, Steve, we promised this. I don't know if you remember this or not. We promised this. Yeah, we promised that Ray would get a shout out for anybody who donated to our festival expenses would get a shout out on the podcast. So now it is time for this shout out. But I want to let everybody, all the listeners know, Ray may not like me saying this, but Ray asked me, tongue in cheek, is there any way he could write the shout out for himself? Of course, it was tongue in cheek, so we're not going to go any further from that. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
We just want to shout out right now, and we want to thank you, Ray, for your support, not only of listening, but also your financial support of this show. We definitely appreciate that.
Well, you're very, very welcome, both you guys. And I think that what you guys are doing is a real blessing to not only your listeners, but the artists that you interview. And you're just doing a wonderful work. And I hope you do it for a long, long time. I enjoy listening to you guys, and I know lots of other people do too. And there's going to be a lot more. Your trajectory is just going up, guys.
Thank you, brother. That means a lot. It truly, absolutely, raw and honest. That means a lot.
Okay. Well, you're very welcome, and it's been a real honor.
Yeah, and interpretation there was Steve going, all right, I'll stay on for another episode.
I'll do one more.
All right. So Ray, talk to us about what you have going on. I know that everything you put out there, you can pretty much get on all streaming platforms, and our listeners are going to be listening to clips of your songs throughout this interview.
Okay.
Your latest one is "I Am Redeemed."
It's out now.
It is out now. It just now became available.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about "I'm Redeemed." Talk to us about what you're doing and what you're planning on doing, as far as and where specifically, where can our listeners find what you're doing?
Go to Twitter first and find us on Twitter. You'll have a lot of fun.
Yes. That's at Roehrborn S.
At Roehrborn S.
Yes. Okay.
At Roehrborn S.
Go
Right.
go ahead and spell that out for everybody.
ROEHR, B as in boy, ORNS. We're on all the main streaming services, YouTube, Spotify, Tidal, Bandcamp, we're everywhere. We're all over. Amazon. You can find all our music there. We just had Redeemed come out today. Actually, it was released. Real important song for us. I mean, lyrically, it kind of covers a lot of ground. It kind of starts out before the resurrection and the state that the world was in, but it mostly talks about the importance of what Christ did for us and us being redeemed by what he did, by the shedding of his blood. And it's really the most important thing that there is, right? In our faith is the redemption from what Christ did for us. So it was a subject that we really hadn't touched on yet, and I'm really happy with the way that it came out, and I think it's an important message for sure. We do have a 6-song EP that's going to be coming out very soon, called Revealed, and that will have some of the singles that we've released, combining with that, along with another song called Live Life Anyway, which is going to be interesting. So that'll be out probably in about 3 or 4 weeks. That'll be our second EP, another 6-song one. So we're pretty excited about that.
It's alright, it's okay. Even though we all die, well, I'm gonna live life anyway. My way. Gonna live life the way it's meant to be, yeah. I'm not running anymore. It's time to see how it's gonna be, yeah.
So everybody's clamoring for this, but it is time now for Wildman's On the Spot segment. This is how we end every show. Wildman's On the Spot. And this is when Steve always rolls his eyes and says, do we really have to do this?
I do, because we've had such a wonderful time with Ray. He's been so gracious. He's been so giving of himself. And now you're going to do this to him.
Okay. I'm just looking for your mute button right now.
I'm not surprised.
Ray and I can take care of this. That's no problem. So, all right. So here you go. Here's your on the spot question. Okay. We've already talked about how multi-talented and multifaceted you are as far as a writer. You've been a performer and as a mixer in the studio. So you have your choice. You can only choose one. Age isn't a factor. It's going to be a success no matter what. Do you prefer the stage or the studio?
The studio. Absolutely, the studio.
Really?
Yes,
okay.
I do. I think I do.
Yeah, why?
That's like asking me would I rather be Eddie Van Halen or Mutt Lange. Kind of a tough choice, but I would go with Mutt Lange. I would want to be the guy who got to interact with all these different wonderfully talented people and see all the success that happens. And yet I can walk down the street and nobody knows who I am. I think that would be wonderful.
Steve and I wouldn't know what that's like. I mean, we can't go anywhere anymore,
Yeah. Can't even go to Arby's. I mean, it's
Oh, well, Ray, this has been great. It's been great to hear you share your heart, and it's just exciting just to hear about your passion. And I see this as motivation for other musicians that are out there, especially those that might be listening. And I'm sure there are some that are listening that are saying, you know what, I used to really want to do that and I gave it up years ago. How could I do it now? I'm telling you folks, if you have that interest, get in touch with Ray. He's the one that helped me get it back on there. There's a way to do it nowadays, which is much easier than what it was years ago with the glass and the reel-to-reel tape and all that. And Ray will get you going. And I appreciate that. I appreciate not only are you so passionate about your own work, but you're passionate about making sure everybody else's work is what it needs to be. And that's what we appreciate about you.
Oh, well, thanks. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. And I appreciate your love of music, your sense of humor, your love of God. You guys are the real deal.
Seems the more we learn, the less we know. Questions of the heart can choose the path that we may go. I hear a world that's telling me need to change what I believe. We can live in faith or live in fear. Beyond what we can see is what can happen here. Now hear a world that's telling me I need to change what I believe. I'm not gonna live my life this way. Not gonna hear what people say. I look beyond what I can see. I'm gonna live what I believe.
It was an honor to interview Ray Roehrborn. He is such a talented man, able to play an amazing guitar, write great songs, and produce and mix in the studio. One thing I have witnessed personally about this man is the encouragement he brings to others. When I got back into recording a little over a year ago, it was Ray who had the patience to walk me through the steps necessary to record and release music in this day and age. This reminds me of Jesus. Jesus always came alongside others and encouraged them to grow in their life. All of the disciples were examples of this, but especially Peter. Peter tried many times, but many times he got things wrong. Yet, Jesus was always there to patiently encourage him and teach him, leading up to when he asked him the famous question, "Do you love me?" Right now, I don't know where Jesus is in your life, but I will tell you one thing, he is on your side. Thank you for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
The Wildman and Steve Show is now partnering with New Release Today. Find out more about them at newreleasetoday.com. And don't forget to check out our website, where you can also leave us a review at wildmanandsteve.com.
Hell is no party, hell is no fun. Face the maker in a crowd of one. Hell is no party.
Sounds like rock and roll to me.